Hi, I'm Danny Youngsmith, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about React Native. A little brief roadmap for you guys. We're going to talk about what React and React Native are. We're going to talk about native versus hybrid mobile frameworks. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of React Native code. We're going to talk about language and syntax, and then the different components that you use in React Native. So first of all, what is React? React is a client-side library that is used for interacting with the DOM. And one of the really amazing parts of React that people tend to cross over to React for is its performance. So instead of updating the DOM constantly and entirely on every single change that is from the program or from the user, the React actually only differentially updates the DOM when there is some kind of change in states. The way that it does this, it creates a virtual DOM, visualized in this image right here, that is a lightweight version of the real DOM. And it has all of the different components of the DOM in terms of the visualization of it, but it has no functionality to actually update the real DOM. So when something changes, like the state changes in the React app, then the virtual DOM completely updates. It completely updates in response to that change, and then it goes through and looks at the updated virtual DOM compared to a snapshot of the DOM right before the update happened, and then looks at the elements that are actually different instead of all of the elements at once. That's a process called diffing, and then once that occurs, all of the diffed elements are the ones that actually get changed in the real DOM. Followed right here. Wonderful. So then going on to React Native. React Native is a mobile framework that uses React to build actually truly native mobile apps. This is really cool because you're actually creating an app itself instead of just a wrapper that uses web-based code and kind of shoves it into an app. I'll get to that later. React Native is also stateful, so it depends totally on state instead of different changes that come through the program or from a user inputting information into it. One of the awesome things about working with React as a developer is that it has it has hot reloading, which is a feature where you pretty much just update a specific portion of your app in the simulator based on things that you have changed instead of updating the entire thing. Very similar to the virtual DOM and being way faster for you to work with it. Why would you choose React Native or a native framework instead of a hybrid framework to build a mobile app? Most of the reasons are for performance. When you create a hybrid application, you are pretty much taking web-based code and sticking that website into a mobile app. So it might look cooler in that you might have some really cool graphics going on, but ultimately it is not as scalable because you get a lot of issues with things like with the fluidity of your app and how it moves and pretty much just how it looks and how it can, the user experience of it. And also one of the things is the memory. If you are shoving an entire website into a mobile app, it adds on a lot more memory than you really need to be storing on a device. And we all know that our devices don't have that much memory in the first place. I'm sure every single one of us has opened our camera and seen that message, your memory is almost full, you can't take this picture. Yeah, that is one of the reasons that you don't want to be, well, one of the reasons that using a native application for building a mobile app is really awesome. In terms of how to actually build a React Native app, we'll talk a little bit about the syntax. One of the awesome things about React is that it is written entirely in JavaScript. And guess what? We all know JavaScript, so that is fantastic for us. Also, it really supports ES6, which is great, but was very difficult because I was learning ES6 as well as React Native at the same time. Pretty much it uses classes as the main portions of your React app, and then uses functions within those classes and renders an app on your phone. As you can see, render function, pretty much everything within the render function gets rendered to your screen. And then within the view, you can have different views as divs. And then text elements, you can pretty much just add text to get your really original hello world. JSX Elements are the basic units of React Native apps, and they look like HTML, but they're not. They're actually treated as JavaScript objects, which means that you can do the same thing that you could do, all of the same things that you could do with a JavaScript object as with your JSX element. So for example, here, both of these two pieces of code will render the exact same thing that we saw on the previous screen. The difference is that here, you are setting a variable with your JSX element above the return function, or the return value, and then you are interpolating using curly braces, as we all know, to get this variable inside of the view instead of actually putting it in here. For this example, it's not that exciting, but you could definitely see the potential for it if you're writing really long pieces of JSX elements, in which case you would be able to insert that entirely in there and then have your return function be super nice and clean. And then once we get through the syntax of it, the main backbone of React Native apps are component classes. They are the way that you can modularize, you can reuse a bunch of your code, you can create one button to use in a bunch of different places, you can create a group of buttons and use that in a single place or an entire view, however you want to do it. It's really, really nice and flexible. A component class is just a JavaScript class, and you can instantiate it. You can instantiate it to make a component instance, and that's the way that you use it in different pieces of your application. The main parts of component classes are, of course, the render function, which gives you what you're going to render on the screen. And then you have your JSX elements in each of these. An important thing to remember is that these tags that look like HTML tags are JSX elements and not tags, which are themselves different component classes in React Native. View, text, image, all of those are actually built-in classes to React Native, which is really awesome because it gives you a lot of functionality that you don't have to write yourself, and you can then focus on creating your own different component classes, like my RN Tech Talk component class. And then from here, actually rendering some kind of dynamic page, you can get dynamic data into your component classes via state and props. State is defined within a component class itself, and then from there you can use different methods within the component class to alter state, which then lets you render different views from that state. For example, in this piece of code, it's from our stackathon. The very first box on the top is where you are initializing the state so you would have this.state.graphed is false, and then within the getEmotions method, you have a piece right here that sets the state to true, which then tells you within the render function which view you're going to render. So initially, when this.state.graphed is false, you would go here and render this portion of the code to the screen. Once you run the getEmotions function, which is within the onPress function here, then you will go to this else statement and render that to the view instead. So it's a really great way to pretty much just pick and choose different situations in which you would be able to render different views to your screen. This .props is a way to pass information between different components, or also create event handlers. So here is an example of an event handler function. So right there you have the onPress. We all know that. That is referred to as this.props.onPress, and the value of this.props.onPress is set to this.takePicture as the event handler and defined below it in the component class here. Another example of this, of using props within by passing information between two classes, is in this wonderful tutorial that I found. So here you can see that you're instantiating greeting in lots of greetings, which is this component here, and then you're passing in a props called name. In the greeting component class, you have a this.props.name reference, which then interpolates to the name that you pass in for each of these cases. So here I can change it to Tessa, and it says, hello, Tessa. You can see it rendered in this view. You can also change name to be your name, and it won't render because you have no this.props.yourname. But if you change it to that, then you have Tessa, and then these ones don't render. Pretty cool. And then, this does too. So, a couple takeaways of React Native. It is fast because it doesn't always update the DOM on every single call that you make a change on. It is modular, so you can create different components and then reuse them, use them anywhere you want, alter them the way that you want with state and props. It's really truly native. You're creating components that are actually mobile, so it works very fluidly with a mobile device. It's stateful. You're changing the view based on the different states that you have. It is JavaScript friendly, and it is just all around pretty awesome. And these are my resources.